An interesting man to write about.
Well, he certainly is. He's a man I've known for many decades. And he was a man who was a successful businessman. He was successful on television, and the press, the media loved him. Cameos in movies. They couldn't stop writing about him. And then he announced he was running for president. He became the devil incarnate. The left, from the time he took office, has been having a collective breakdown. They blew their collective gasket. And now they've been trying to take him out of office. And because I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years, I know the crime business. I've been in it a long time, and I know a con when I see it. And what they did with this president and continue to do was they set up a fake investigation with a make-believe dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton, the opposing political party, started an investigation. And this president, for 19 months, has been under an investigation that has shown nothing connected to him. And, they will not stop. It is part of the lying, speaking, liberal left that just won't quit. And that's why I wrote the book. I thought it was important, and I outlined all of this in the book.
I understand that, again, your book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, you do discuss Peter Strzok. But interesting, you wrote about him before his recent testimony before Congress. So I'm just curious, did his testimony surprise you, or did you pretty much have him pegged?
I'm very impressed. You really did read the book. Yeah, I did. I think the book actually is almost prescient because I had not heard Peter Strzok, nor did anyone, in the general public here until he testified last Thursday. The guy was smug, arrogant, condescending, defiant, unapologetic, all of the things that you would expect based on the emails with his lover, Lisa Page. But the interesting part of it all is he said, well, don't, it's like one of those, don't believe your lying eyes. I said that the guy would destabilize the country. I said we'll have to stop him. And I talked about an insurance policy, which we now know is the Russia collusion in the event he was elected. But don't believe anything I said. It was late. It appears that his girlfriend, Lisa Page, now testifying behind closed doors, is taking him on with respect to what his intent was. And look, I've worked with FBI agents. I've worked with police my whole life. I had an office with 50 law enforcement cops who worked with me. And I love law enforcement. I have tremendous respect. And the shame of this is that they have to hang their heads because people at the top of the FBI, McCabe, Comey, Strzok, Witwicky, Baker, all these guys were involved in an attempted coup. And, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, but, man, they ripped those bandages off so that they could investigate this man and impeach him. And from the time Donald Trump got there was anything that he's done right to them. And I write in the book about all the good stuff. Not a single metric is worse under Donald Trump. The economy's never been better. ISIS caliphate is defeated. There's deregulation. Businesses are being expanded. Tax reform. Americans have more money in their pockets now. And they hate the man. But, anyone at the tip of the spear knows there's going to be pushback. But there isn't a better person to push back than Donald Trump.
That's for sure. And it seems like I was just saying before you came on, it seems like every time the deep state or the media, sets these traps for him, eventually they fall into their own nets. We're talking with Judge Jeanine Pirro, her new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. Now, you mentioned, having offices next to some of these people throughout your career. Speaking of leakers, you talk about FBI director, former director James Comey. I understand you used to work, close to him. Your offices were right.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. We're so glad that you're with us. Our whiteboard for the rest of the week says free versus freedom. Comparing the two, free versus freedom. What does that mean? Well, we'll expound on it a little bit more throughout the week, I'm sure. But if you wanted to know the definition of free in this context, is free is when someone gets something for nothing. That's pretty straightforward. Freedom, though, is something that costs the lives of others, something that somebody else has to do. At least that's kind of what my perspective is this morning. What do you think about it? I'll take your text messages at 870-275-9799 or your calls. Feel free to pop on over to facebook.com/Conduit News where you can sound off in the comments. I see we have listeners already coming on board with us. Appreciate it. I see that we had Mr. John Calvin Martin. He's listening. He's actually going to be on the program tomorrow during our Patriots of Act 746 segment. John, thanks for listening. Tim, Paula, good to see you guys. So we're going to get into some national news here in just a second. It has to do with the government shutdown, potential government shutdown, the border wall funding, the idea of the consent of the governed, and how that is being really taken for granted by the leaders in the swamp in Washington, D.C. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She says she has 5 years on the court. I'll tell you how there is a slight Arkansas connection with that. Also, Fort Smith is okay to bond refinancing. $160 million package also includes $82 million for water system. This is David Hughes at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette with a story. Folks, first of all, bond financing, when people do these bonds, when the government does these bonds, it's debt, number one, but it's also a future tax increase. And you have to look at it that way because they're gambling with their money. In this case, the city of Fort Smith is doubling down. It'd be like if you were at a gambling table of some kind and you wanted to double down. We'll give you that story as well. Also, understanding the labor force participation rate. I just want to take you through a little bit of history over the last 8 years versus where we are now under President Trump. Where we were under President Obama, skyrocketing Social Security disability rates, people are just dropping out of the workforce left and right. We'll give you a little bit of insight into that. At the top of the next hour, I want to talk a little bit about this experimental program in Benton County where they're going to charge the families of inmates to see their loved ones, but they're not going to do in-person visits anymore. They're going to do it digitally and have kiosks. It's very strange, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. What else do we have? We'll have a carefully crafted language segment, which is going to start with some uncarefully crafted language by this socialist from New York, Ocasio-Cortez. Just bear with me here. There's a point to all of this. And then at the bottom of the next hour, we're going to welcome to the program Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch. He's the author of a new book, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. Of course, he's been on really all of your big-time media outlets and has a really extensive resume, very, very intelligent when it comes to this stuff. But specifically, I wanted to have him on to talk about this Toronto shooting rampage and how the Canadian media, keeping their own people in the dark. I think our media keeps us in the dark a lot of times, but it was the U.S. that started reporting the fact that this guy had been to some of these radical websites. Anyway, so that's the news of the day, and we are going to get his opinions on that, and I'm sure much, much more. Let's start with the fact that during the 2016 election, President Donald Trump, how many times did President Donald Trump say he was going to build a wall? I told you the other day on this program, I vastly underestimated this as a very big issue, but it was the one thing. I was watching Tucker Carlson last night on Fox News, and Tucker rightly pointed out that the one thing that President Donald Trump during his campaign was crystal clear on, the one commitment he made to the country was that he was going to build a wall. And now we once again have Washington, D.C., the likes of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell saying they're not going to include funding for Homeland Security and a border wall coming up to this September deadline. And, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to honestly ask ourselves, is that the consent of the governed in action? Is our government actually working where you have this big key issue and you have the Republican Party establishment, and Trump is anti-establishment? Can we agree with that? I mean, he comes back from Helsinki, and both parties are mad at him. Makes me think he did something good. That's just my knee-jerk reaction. But the Republican Party here wants your vote, but they don't ever want to do anything when it comes to this big ticket stuff. Everybody voted for more border security. You have Senator Tom Cotton that with the President Trump has tried to take the lead here, tried to suggest some actual merit-based immigration reform, which is a great idea. Other countries have merit-based immigration reforms because you want to make sure that you come here and you actually are going to produce and contribute with your skills that you already have. And that's a noble goal, and you know most societies understand that they want to have some sort of process that is merit based in some way, shape, or form. Well, no, we can't do that. You're a racist if you. It's like, what are you talking about? Racism? We're not talking about racism. We're talking about legal immigration. We've got to put a wall down there. It's ridiculous. Not to mention you have the crime, you have the drugs, you have the sex trafficking. It's one of the most violent places on the face of the earth, and it's right at our doorstep. I mean, it's embarrassing. We're the United States of America. You want to talk about the concept of making America great again? How about the southern border not being one of the most dangerous places in the world? Can we start there? Can we say, okay, now America's great again because we can take down the signs that say, hey, don't go down this road close to the border because we can't guarantee your safety, like they put up in the Obama administration? How about we have a secure country where you're free to travel without being, murdered? I mean, good grief. So, all that being said, where is the funding for the wall? I have this story here from The Hill. Joe, you don't have it, but it's okay. I just wanted to read this. A senior Republican aide, according to The Hill, noted that the appropriations bill funding the Department of Homeland Security, which has jurisdiction over the border, will not make it to Trump's desk until after the midterm elections. That means the president won't know whether funding for the border wall is in legislation until after the election. And look, everybody wants to get back to regular order. Everybody wants, these appropriations bills to be voted on the way they're supposed to. Everybody wants Congress to do what they're constitutionally supposed to do and haven't been doing forever, which is pass a budget and do it within the confines of the Constitution. But the American people, I think, deserve the Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party kept the House and they kept the Senate, and President Donald Trump was elected. You think they kept the House and kept the Senate last time because of President Trump? Of course they did. That was a big part of it. Now, there's also some ideas out there, some theories about what the Republican establishment is doing. Now, you have to assume that they don't like Trump, which I think that's a pretty safe assumption. He's certainly not the status quo. He's certainly not marching to the same beat, the same tune that everybody wants. The mainstream media, again, tries to set the goalposts. You can have the debate within the... No, President Trump has no borders, no pun intended, when it comes to what he's going to do. It's very clear he is anti-establishment, and they don't know what to do with him. It's exciting to watch. I'm just saying, isn't it exciting to watch? I mean, unless you have Trump derangement syndrome, and then it's like every time he does something, quote, exciting, you have to, it's like another $150 for an hour of therapy. Like we saw the story in the headlines the other day with D.C., people having to go. D.C. therapists, the economy's doing good because the therapists their profits are skyrocketing in Washington, D.C., according to reports. No, but there is a theory out there that some Republicans might want a government shutdown, the establishment might want a government shutdown because they want to lose the House. There are some people out there that think members of the Republican Party establishment want to lose the House so they can blame it on President Donald Trump. Do you believe that? Do you believe that there are some people that would love, in the Republican establishment, that would like to lose power so they can blame it on the non-establishment President Donald Trump? It's an interesting idea. I'm not completely convinced, but I could very easily see it. Lou Dobbs was on Tucker Carlson last night, and they were talking specifically. They talked specifically about the Koch brothers. Go to Breitbart real quick. This headline here is on the front page of Breitbart this morning. Plutocrat Charles Koch, Trump tariffs ridiculous, unfair to foreigners. So he's talking about the steel tariffs and the aluminum tariffs. It's not fair to other countries, not fair to their. And it's like, okay, well, shouldn't we be able to manufacture and be dependent on our own steel and our own aluminum, build our own planes, to build our own military equipment right here? I mean, if that's, to me, if anything, on the tariff side, I know there's different philosophies on this. Tariffs are bad, or you're not for a free market, or whatever. But when it comes to steel and aluminum, you can make the argument. You can make a national security argument all day long on that one, at least. But it's more than that, because this idea of a cheap labor force, wages are going to go lower. They're going to stay low as long as we have unchecked illegal immigration. And I think a lot of Americans are finally getting that for the first time. Now let's go to Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs on Tucker Carlson last night, he was asked the same question. What about Mitch McConnell? What about Paul Ryan? They're not going to give him the border wall funding. They're ignoring the will of the American people. The one thing, I mean, how many times did you hear audiences at these massive Trump rallies say, build the wall, build the wall? You also heard lock her up, but you also heard build the wall, build the wall. And Lou Dobbs went on Tucker Carlson last night. It sounded like this.
I'm kind of speechless to this.
Well, that's the problem. All of this becomes ineffable to describe, to accept, and to deal with, because it is so obviously toxic and corrosive. There are so many sellouts. You know that the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate are made up of simply, acolytes of expediency, and of course, corporate America, the U.S. multinationals, and the Koch brothers, Wall Street, Business Roundtable, and the Chamber of Commerce. And by the time you get through, there's no room for the American people, just 300 million of us. There's no room for the middle class, working men and women and their families. That's why President Trump got elected. The American people sensed the inordinate power and corruption of the establishment, and that's why this anti-establishment president was elected.
But they're proving the point. So a lot of people voted for Trump because they thought, this isn't a democracy, it's an oligarchy, stop lying to me. Mm-hmm. And now they're proving that it's true. I mean, in a democracy, you would look and say...
Yeah, Tucker's saying here, remember when the president essentially said the system is rigged? Remember when he would say all that the whole time, the system is rigged and we've got to fight it and everything else? He's right. The point is being proved. Keep going. I'm sorry. We're about to run out of time.
What's the thing that voters voted for in the last election? Let's try and do it. They're not even trying.
Yeah, they're not trying, and they're doing it rather snootily, I think, as well. I mean, probably not. Dismissive, superior, and oh, by the way, don't even pretend that you belong in the same room as me. Oh, unwashed, says Mitch McConnell. And Paul Ryan, he's talking about a better way agenda to compete when in fact what they're both saying is we're going to do exactly what Charles Koch says. We're going to keep open borders. We're going to bring across as many illegal immigrants as possible. The middle class be damned. The working man and woman in this country be damned. America be damned. They're not going, even though they've styled it as such, going against Trump. They're going against this country and our most precious values and all that has made us great, and that's our middle class.
So why would people, I mean, apart from the fact the Democratic Party has actually gone off the deep end and is dangerous, leaving that aside, why would anybody vote for Republicans right now?
Right now, there's only one reason. His name's Donald J. Trump. He's the man who won the election. He is the reason the Republicans retained the House and the Senate, and there is no other explanation. And these fools leading the House and the Senate, Tucker, they really have decided that they can do this without Donald Trump. They don't have to affix themselves to the Trump agenda. They don't have to talk about deregulation. They don't have to look at all that he has achieved. This is already an historic president in a year, just over a year and a half in office. It's remarkable.
But the second they get crushed, assuming, let's say the Republicans lose the House.
Yes, as they likely will if they leave, particularly Ryan in place.
But they're going to blame Trump.
Of course they will. That's the game. And the American people, that will know the reason. There's a party that's not worthy of their support, not worthy of their trust. There is a president, and this is going to be the great divide because we are watching oligarchs like the Koch brothers carry out class warfare. Think of this. The Koch brothers, who have been synonymous with the Republican Party, are conducting class warfare against the middle class, the foundation of the country, working men and women, and saying, the hell with you, we can bring in illegal immigrants. We're going to arbitrage labor costs just as we've been doing around the world.
Lou Dobbs,
I'm telling you. Okay, so that was Lou Dobbs on Tucker Carlson last night. Now, okay, first of all, some incredible stuff. This news about the Koch brothers and everything else is a big deal. I want to talk a little bit more about that. I think I've got that scheduled on Friday coming up this week, just to kind of pontificate about it. But do you guys remember when Lou Dobbs' show was on CNN? It was the best thing that CNN ever had. I think Lou Dobbs' show, and I remember I would watch it as the news hound that I am. I would watch Lou Dobbs on CNN, and I'd be like, he talks about illegal immigration every night. Back during the Bush administration, where they had the phrase comprehensive immigration reform, he picked it to pieces. You know, it failed under the, George W. Bush was pushing it. He was like, this isn't comprehensive immigration reform. They're not doing anything. He talked about, he's been on the illegal immigration topic for forever. I can't remember a time when he wasn't. I mean, I know he did other stuff before, but I mean, in modern times, this guy has been exposing what's been going on at the southern border for a very long time. And I am telling you right now, if you look at that, you look at the amount of influence that Lou Dobbs has had on this debate has been probably incalculable. I mean, he's done such a good job bringing this to the forefront. And now you're going to have people like Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell say no border wall funding. It was the one thing Donald Trump said he wanted to do. And the left is always like, elections have consequences. Obama, that's why we have Obamacare, or why we had it, or why we still have remnants of it. People in Arkansas love it. I mean, the politicians, they can't get enough of a socialist health care program from a socialist president, which is strange to me, some of these Republicans. But anyway, we got to take a break. Let me know what you think about this. Is it time to build the wall? What is Washington, D.C. doing? The concept of the consent of the governed, where you vote and nothing changes. We've seen that here at the local level, and no surprise that we're seeing it at the national level. Don't go anywhere, folks. This is Conduit News Radio. Back in a moment. Next to each other, and tell me about Cardinal Comey. Tell me about this name, Cardinal Comey. What does that mean?
Well, I knew James Comey. I was the elected DA in Westchester County. He was United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time, and our offices were next to each other. And I liked the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say, he went to Washington and he drifted because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew prosecutor. With Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants. All the while, she destroys evidence, freaks bits, hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. I mean, they call him in the FBI behind his back Cardinal Comey. I speak to FBI. I'm friends with the FBI because he's got this holier than thou. I know everything, and now he's quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works, Obamacare, private option has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are two matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Let's not forget, in the context of all of this, I want you to know something. The way the news goes, I mean, we try to plan out what we're going to talk about, but this program it's amazing. It's not a coincidence what ends up happening, how the sequence of events unfolded, and everything kind of fits together like a puzzle piece. And it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, you just know. So yesterday in the program, we had on at the bottom of the second hour, 7:33 segment, Maria Espinoza from the Remembrance Project, and we're just highlighting it. It was just. I got an email from a PR firm saying, "Hey, we have this guest. Would they like you?" And I said, "Absolutely, bring her on." And she comes on. We talk about illegal immigration, right? It was it just happened to be at the same time where President Trump was saying, "You know what? If I don't get the border wall funding, I'm going to shut down the government." So that in and of itself, right? And she talks about what? The fact that we have illegal immigration and we have murders and deaths that could be prevented if we would just secure our border, right? And then we have this last night from Lou Dobbs. We have them saying we're not going to build it. It's not lost. I mean, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan saying we're not going to give you the funding for the border wall is the other thing on top of it that can't be lost is that interview we did with Maria Espinoza yesterday. It talks about, okay, well, not only are they not going to build the wall, well, that's just more unchecked illegal immigration and more potential deaths of Americans. It's not just an economic issue with the Koch brothers and everything else, or the donors and the special interests. It's also life and death, security of the country. Again, one of the most violent places on the planet is our southern border, parts of it. I think it'd be great to make America great again by having our southern border not be one of the most violent places in the world. Anyone?
Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. admitted you're a Laker. I mean, I could go on, but you got to get my book. Lakers, Lakers, and liberals.
Yeah, and it's available now, folks. So we've thrown the Amazon page up on the screen for those of you who are watching as instead of listening. Now, 3 days. I'd love to get your opinion, Judge Janine, on the recent news here. 3 days before President Trump and President Putin were scheduled to meet in Helsinki, you had the announcement of the 12 Russians being indicted. Now, to me, it seemed that there were some trying to stop this diplomacy or attempt at diplomacy from ever happening. And if it was going to happen, they were going to make it really, really difficult and give the media all of the fodder they needed to try to paint this concept of collusion. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that Mueller announced those indictments 3 days before the Helsinki meeting?
I like you. No, it's no coincidence. Of course, they decided to say we're indicting 12 Russians. Well, if you recall, they indicted 13 a few months back, having nothing to do with Donald Trump or collusion. They indicted a total of 25 Russians, or charged them, who will never be extradited, never be arrested, arraigned, tried, convicted, or sentenced. I mean, what is the point? It just keeps it in the news, and they're trying to get Donald Trump off his game. But as I say in the book, the man's a force of nature. He can walk into a den of lions and come out the winner. He has no fear. He takes incoming every day for the American people. And when you think about it, that guy could be in Scotland right now. He could have stayed in Scotland and kept playing golf. But he doesn't. He does it for us. And I'm honestly sick and tired of the attempt to destroy this man. I get politics. I've run for office 5 times, PA, and a county judge and all that. But this is beyond the pale. They're calling for treason, sedition, because, he didn't take Putin out on stage when in truth, no one has had more severe sanctions on Russia. We're arming the Ukrainians against the Russians. Barack Obama stood and watched while the Russians annexed Crimea, and right now, what we're doing with Crimea is we're helping them to be able to, defend themselves. And the other piece on the Russia piece is that we got mass sanctions because of Crimea. We killed hundreds of Russians in Syria, and then Obama just talked about the red line. We've expelled Russians from the U.S.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back to the program. I'm going to remind everybody I'm going to be at Larry's Pizza in Faulkner County and Conway Thursday at noon for the Faulkner County Tea Party luncheon. I'm excited about that. Feel free to stop by, and I would love to see you, love to meet you. Always a thrill to talk to the Faulkner County Tea Party and the luncheon that they do. So on Thursday, that's this Thursday at noon at Larry's Pizza, I'll be there, and love to see you out there. Okay, this story from Frank Lockwood caught my eye. Have you guys heard of Predict It? Predict It is a way to essentially buy shares in political issues. And if it goes one way, if it goes your way, the way you predict it, then you actually get the money. There's a story here that an Arkansan is actually working for Predict It. He's a top employee at this political wagering site. Shares predicting Cotton presidential nomination trade for 3 cents each, meaning Tom Cotton. I mean, they got questions for everything, like every possibility, it seems. Predict It refers to itself as stock market for politics, okay? Since the fall 2014, it's roughly 85,000 clients have made more than 800 million trades, including 27 million on Election Day. And Arkansan is one of its top employees. They're going to receive their 1 billionth trade this year, according to estimates. Predict It is what's called a forecasting or prediction market. Markets are considered to be pretty good at predicting the cost of orange juice futures or pork bellies or hurricane landfall options. The question is, why not political or geopolitical events, which is what PredictIt measures? The money is a key component. When you have a little skin in the game, even as little as $1, it causes you to think a little bit more clearly about what you think is going to happen and try to separate that from what you want to have happen. And that's how PredictIt functions. So traders purchase either a yes share or a no share at a price somewhere between 1 cent and 99 cents. If they win, they receive $1 per share minus fees. If they lose, they receive nothing. So PredictIt, that got me thinking, because as soon as I read that article, lo and behold, I see this scroll across CNN. I know that's my problem and my fault for going to CNN. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg has suggested she has at least 5 more years on the Supreme Court. She wishes she had 5 more years. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said she hopes to stay on the Supreme Court until the age of 90. Quote, I'm now 85, Ginsburg said on Sunday. My senior colleague, Justice John Paul Stevens, he stepped down when he was 90, so I think I have about at least 5 more years. She has already hired law clerks for at least 2 more terms. Ginsburg spoke in New York following a production of The Originalist, a play about the late Justice Antonin Scalia at the 59E59 Theater. Quote, if I had my choice of dissenters when I was writing for the court, it would be Justice Scalia. Apparently, Ginsburg and Scalia were good friends. They just were on the opposite sides of the Constitution. Honestly, I don't understand how liberal Supreme Court justices, especially the likes of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she goes abroad, she criticizes the United States Constitution and says that if you're going to start a country, you need to look at the South African Constitution. Like, what kind of... Yes. That's exactly right. That's what... I know, it isn't that outrageous. My problem with it is this. Like, at some point, you have some sort of... I would have an integrity issue. Like, why would you want to be a judge whose sole goal is to alter the mission of the people that wrote the document you're supposed to enforce? So when you say, well, you really shouldn't do the American model, that's what Ginsburg said. You should do the South African model. They've much better, Well, I mean, and then you interpret the Constitution as such, trying to change it, trying to invent new responsibilities, trying to, add more powers to the federal government than what's prescribed in the enumerated powers. I guess I just don't understand how liberal Supreme Court justices or liberal judges want to do that and main what to me it's just a facade of this respect for the law, because you don't really respect it if you're not going to attempt to say, you know what, you have to interpret this along the lines of what the original intent of the document was, the definitions of words and phrases. We know what those meant. We know what those words meant in the 18th century. It's not hard, not a complicated thing to figure out. There's all kinds of extra writings as well where people are very specific about what they meant that document to be, how they were counting on the fallibility of man to try to dominate others and use the government to do it, so they had to create a document that limited what government could do, and President Obama himself, he lamented this. The Constitution is a charter of negative liberties, of negative rights, says what the government can't do to you, but then what did he say? But it doesn't say what the government must do on your behalf. That is the entire liberal goal when it comes to Supreme Court justices, activist judges. This law doesn't say what I think should happen. That's essentially any time the judicial branch legislates from the bench, or they try to reinvent, bend the words, whatever, they're essentially saying, well, if I had been a founding father, the law doesn't say what they didn't consult me. The law didn't say what I wanted it to say. The law didn't reflect my altruism, and so I've got to step in here. That's really what it is. I think, and I think in essence, a lot of that is a weakness. I think some judges are so afraid to apply the law dispassionately because of what it might do to somebody else in a negative light that they are weak and they can't do it. So instead, they cave and they say, but I think the law should have said this, and so we're going to claim, we're going to say, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to hurt your feelings. So the Constitution does have a right of marriage in the Constitution, and it's the government's job to regulate marriage. And I know it's not in there, but it should have been in there. And if we say that it's not in there, it's going to hurt so many people's feelings, and we won't get to put a rainbow on the White House. It's actually just a weakness. Just apply the law. If you got a problem with the law, the good news is there's a way to change it. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. Speaking of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and speaking of this company Predicted, where an Arkansan is a top employee there, will Ruth Bader Ginsburg be the next justice to leave the Supreme Court? You can buy a yes vote for 1 cent, or you can buy a no vote for 1 cent. It says right here, click to match offers starting at 1 cent or to make your own offer. There are no shares currently available. Click to make an offer. Interesting. I haven't clicked on anything. I don't even know, but it says there's been 159,000 shares traded. The start date of this question was December 9th of 2016. Yeah, okay. So so do they have a new one then? Because honestly, I guess this could still apply though now. I mean, I know Kennedy has now since left. Right. Well, anyway, point is you can find something on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Let's see here. Fort Smith okays a bond refinancing. This headline is ridiculous. $160 million package also includes $82 million for water system work. I hear Jake Files' company has secured the bid. That's a joke. So the first sentence here is that doing this, refinancing the bond. Now, what is bond? Bonds are debt. Bonds are future tax increases. The first line here, though, the city will save $9 million in bond debt payments by refinancing revenue bonds. Now, hang on. These bonds were issued 10 years ago, and we're refinancing so we can make the payments. 2008, $67 million in Series 2008 bonds was part of a $160 million bond ordinance the city directors passed on Tuesday night that also called for issuing $82 million in new bonds to raise money for continued work on the city's water and wastewater systems. Can you say doubling down? Let's refinance so we can afford the payments, and while we're there, we'll increase our credit limit a little bit. We'll go into debt another $82 million. What do you say? Folks, this is no way. And I know people, listen, there are people in city governments that are listening to this that are like, no, we've got to have bonds. It's just because you haven't thought it through. It's just because you've been conditioned to think this is the only way that we can ever do anything is by going into debt. This is the only way we can ever have the progress that we want is by going into debt. Maybe you're spending money doing other things that government shouldn't be doing in the first place. Ever think about that? Ever think about we just keep inventing new, again, common theme, new responsibilities for what government's supposed to do, and then new expectations. Then you have the next generation that's accustomed to a certain level, and then they want more, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows, and we have more tax increases, we have more debt, we have more bonds. And see, the reason they do bonds is because they don't really have the stomach to go to the population and say, we really need to raise your taxes. I mean, they might do a cent here or a cent there, but when it comes to financing these bonds, what these local governments do is they're really doing this because they don't want to have to go on record and say, we got to have more money from you, the people. But the fact is, this is a backdoor way. Bonds are a backdoor tax increase because if the economy were to tank or there was something that would happen or you have somebody that's mismanaging money, guess what? They got to pay $9 million in bond debt payments. They have to service the debt. Folks, you can get over leveraged and you don't have money to service the debt. What's the problem with America right now? Well, everybody's very worried. They're very worried. We have trillions of dollars in debt here in this country. And everybody says that if interest rates were to ever return to historical norms, we would not be able to make the interest payments, let alone pay down any of the principal. This can happen with local governments as well. And it's a lot more serious because there's no printing press, is there? The state of Arkansas went bankrupt in the 30s by doing stuff like this. We forget that. I wasn't around then. They just didn't have a 21st century economic model for economic development. Had they been thinking the way we think now, in the 30s, Arkansas wouldn't have gone bankrupt by trying to build those roads. Give me a break. The telephone number is 870-275-9799. City of Fort Smith on these bonds. You got to think about it as being at a gambling table in Las Vegas or Tunica. And you got to think about doubling down. Let's just double down. Let's do double or nothing. I'll take out $82,000 more, or $82 million more. Okay, let's talk about the labor force participation rate. We've seen the labor force participation rate. Okay, you've seen some of the numbers. We talked about them last week. They're out. By the way, the economic numbers are still great, and the left is still freaking out about it. It's fantastic. 4.1 economic growth. They're on pace to average. They want to average in the high threes. They want to get that 5% mark, though, one quarter. We'll see what happens. The left is crazy, out of control, freaking out about all this. This headline, though, I want to take you back, okay? I want to take you back to 2012. So understanding the labor force participation rate. And if you I know it's in 2014, but this starts on originally published in 2012. So understanding the labor force participation rate. And by the way, this is an issue that Conduit for Commerce, is on top of, because Conduit for Commerce is about small business. They're about looking out for small business. They're about doing the job that other organizations used to claim to do, like the Chamber. But conduitforcommerce.org, you need to check them out. They're putting Arkansas small business first. So understanding the labor force participation rate, pretty easy. It's those who are actively seeking work. But if you go back to this flashback article, I just want you to understand how bad it was under President Obama. This was originally published back in 2012. Then it was revised back on 2014, September 4th. This is from the Heritage Foundation. If you scroll down, it talks about the remaining drop in the participation primarily comes from millions more people collecting Social Security disability insurance. So the labor force participation rate was abysmal during the Obama years. Why? Because people, during the recession, they lost their jobs, and then they just, they quit looking for work. And what was the Obama administration able to say once you quit looking for work? Well, we're not going to, count you anymore. So the unemployment rate has dropped, right? The unemployment rate is low, and it's falling, and the government's doing their job. Now, in what world would you get to do something like that? In what world would you get to leave out key data if you were in a private sector having to? Joe rightly points out hospitals do stuff like this all the time, and they're nonprofits though, Joe. Hospital math, yeah, that's very, very good. Yeah, I guess hospitals do stuff like this all the time where they just leave out key statistics to make their losses look much worse, so they get more taxpayer money. You also had back in 2012, 2014, according to this story, they reported on the collapse of the housing bubble and that sort of thing. But listen to this. scroll down to where it says lower participation equals lower unemployment. As high as the unemployment numbers are, they still overstate the economy's performance. Since the recession began, again, this is a flashback, the labor force participation rate, the production of adults either working or trying to find work, has fallen by 3.2 percentage points. Okay, go to this new article here. Ivanka Trump is right. Labor participation among 16 to 64-year-olds is surging. Listen to this. I think one of the tremendous opportunities that we're seeing because the economy is so strong is that people who have been out of the workforce are coming back off the sidelines, and this is something we're working incredibly hard to incentivize because there's a large population of prime-age men and women who are out of the workforce and who are now slowly starting to return, and we're seeing that. That was Ivanka Trump, daughter of Donald Trump, talking about the state of the U.S. economy and labor markets on Fox Business back on July 1st. Everybody gave her a lot of grief over that, but she's right. That is what is happening. You are seeing a strong labor participation rate come back. Now, here in Arkansas, we have a skilled workforce shortage, and it's bad. We don't have enough people staying here with skills. We have a lot of jobs, and there's, business owners need somebody to show up to work on time still. They need somebody to be able to pass a drug test, right? And that's essentially what is required right now, and then you can be, taught some skills. We have a skilled workforce shortage here in this country. Again, reminder, though, where we were, though. Where were we? This Forbes article back on June 30th of 2015 entitled The Boom in Disability Benefits. In 2013, NPR covered the rise on people on disability insurance in the United States. The piece depicted a program that was outdated and abused, sparking a media firestorm that culminated in a rebuttal signed by former Social Security disability insurance commissioners. But today, disability rates continue to rise. Anyway, it's fun to go and look at these flashbacks and to see where we were versus where we are now. And you look at the optimism out there as you interview small business owners. They are optimistic. They are looking for employees. I saw a poll of black Americans that actually said that the free trade has actually made it harder for them to get a job over the years, and that what Donald Trump is doing with these tariffs is actually helping them find a job. That was a very interesting poll because I wouldn't have even thought to ask the question about something like that. Anyway, labor force participation rate, certainly want to be familiar with that, want to watch the economic growth moving forward. And again, right now, therapist profits are way up because of a 4.1% gross domestic product of the second quarter. The growth there. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Increasing missile defense in the intel community. I mean, not what you say, it's what you do.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. It's almost like they wanted a boxing match up there in that press conference, and they didn't get it. And it's quite, you mentioned treason. They're now claiming that a diplomatic meeting was treason, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty low bar. I mean, if that's the bar you're going to set, what was the Hillary Clinton Uranium One debacle? I mean, wasn't that then treason?
Oh, yeah, the sale of 20% of all uranium to the Russians was when the Clinton Foundation gets a $145 million kickback. Bill gets a quick $500 cash for a 20-minute speech in Russia. You want to talk about collusion? How about we talk about the fact that the effort on the part of Russia to access our uranium, which was all about bribery and corruption, and they found Hillary Clinton. And that case is a case that was handled by
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, good morning to you. Welcome to the program, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking with Mr. Robert Spencer at 7:33. He's the director of Jihad Watch, author of the new book, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. Spencer has led seminars on Islam and Jihad for the FBI, the United States Central Command, the United States Army Command and General Staff College, the U.S. Army's Asymmetric Warfare Group, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Justice Department. See, I can pronounce it when it's legitimate. The Justice Department's Anti-Terrorism Advisory Council, and the U.S. intelligence community. I want to talk a little bit about this Toronto shooting up in Canada. Found it fascinating that you had a few stories in America. You had some from conservative sites saying that, the Canadian people were being left in the dark about this guy's ties to radical Islam. Definitely want to talk about that and just get to know Robert Spencer even more. I mean, I've been following him for a while, but he is certainly an extremely interesting guy. Anyway, then I guess next hour, I want to talk a little bit about this Benton County proposal. Over in Benton County, they're talking about doing away with in-person inmate visits. So if you're family and you want to see your jailed family member, you're not going to be able to see them face-to-face. You're going to have to go to a kiosk and pay money. Now, talk about revenue generation. Something doesn't seem right about that, but let me know what you think about it. Also, folks, wrapping up here, I really want to get your thoughts, want to get your feelings on this concept of not building a wall. I mean, the establishment of both parties is clear. They don't want to build a wall. They don't want to stop illegal immigration. They don't want to institute a merit-based immigration. They don't want the middle class wages to rise here. I mean, there's a lot of Americans wrapping their head around the fact that, unchecked illegal immigration is a disaster for our economy, not to mention for our welfare rolls. I mean, you've got a twofold here. Unchecked illegal immigration, welfare system that's easy to get on, that encourages generational dependency, and then the lack of the merit-based legal immigration that would make sure people who come here are raring to go and ready to start, working and not go on the welfare rolls. All those are great ideas. What does it say when Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan are now saying that they're not going to put funding for the wall? They're not going to give them funding for the wall. Why? They don't. What is it? Is there any truth to the fact? And again, this is out there, but there's some people saying, hey, maybe they want a government shutdown. They want to push Trump's buttons so that they'll lose the House, and then they can blame it on Trump. I mean, you know what? Certainly might be in somebody's contingency plan. Well, if this happens, we'll know what to do going forward. He certainly is an anti-establishment president, right? Isn't he?
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
This week it's called Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, the Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. And joining us on the phone, we have the author of that book, Judge Jeanine Pirro, is on the program. Judge Jeanine, it's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Well, thanks. It's good to be with you.
Yes, ma'am. I am so glad that you wrote this book. I've been doing some research about it. And I imagine because we live in these interesting times, it was a pleasure to write about President Donald Trump. Is he an interesting man to write about?
Well, he certainly is. He's a man I've known for many decades. And he was a man who was a successful businessman. He was successful on television, and the press, the media loved him. Cameos in movies. They couldn't stop writing about him. And then he announced he was running for president. He became the devil incarnate. The left, from the time he took office, has been having a collective breakdown. They blew their collective gasket, and now they've been trying to take him out of office. And because I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years, you know, I know the crime business. I've been in it a long time, and I know a con when I see it. And what they did with this president and continue to do was they set up a fake investigation with a make-believe dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton, the opposing political party, started an investigation, and this president for 19 months has been under an investigation that has shown nothing connected to him, and, you know, they will not stop. It is part of the lying, speaking, liberal left that just won't quit, and that's why I wrote the book. I thought it was important, and I outline all of this in the book.
I understand that, again, your book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, you do discuss Peter Strzok. But interesting, you wrote about him before his recent testimony before Congress. So I'm just curious, did his testimony surprise you, or did you pretty much have him pegged?
You know, I'm very impressed you really did read the book. Yeah, I did. I think the book actually is almost prescient, because I had not heard Peter Strzok, nor did anyone, you know, in the general public here, until he testified last Thursday. The guy was smug, arrogant, condescending, defiant, unapologetic, all of the things that you would expect based on the emails with his lover, Lisa Page. But the interesting part of it all is he said, well, don't, you know, it's like one of those, don't believe your lying eyes. I said that the guy would destabilize the country. I said we'll have to stop him. And I talked about an insurance policy, which we now know is the Russia collusion in the event he was elected. But don't believe anything I said. It was late. It appears that his girlfriend, Lisa Page, now testifying behind closed doors, is taking him on with respect to what his intent was. And look, I've worked with FBI agents. You know, I've worked with police my whole life. I had an office with 50 law enforcement cops who worked with me. And I love law enforcement. I have tremendous respect. And the shame of this is that they have to hang their heads because people at the top of the FBI, McCabe, Comey, Strzok, you know, Witwicky, Baker, all these guys were involved in an attempted coup. And, you know, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, but, man, they ripped those bandages off so that they could investigate this man and impeach him. And from the time Donald Trump got there was anything that he's done right to them. And I write in the book about all the good stuff. You know, not a single metric is worse under Donald Trump. The economy's never been better. ISIS caliphate is defeated. You know, there's deregulation. Businesses are being expanded. Tax reform. Americans have more money in their pockets now. I mean, and they hate the man. But, you know, anyone at the tip of the spear knows there's going to be pushback, but there isn't a better person to push back than Donald Trump.
That's for sure. And it seems like I was just saying before you came on, it seems like every time the deep state or the media sets these traps for him, eventually they fall into their own nets. We're talking with Judge Jeanine Pirro, her new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. Now, you mentioned, having offices next to some of these people throughout your career. Speaking of leakers, you talk about FBI director, former director James Comey. I understand you used to work close to him. Your offices were right next to each other. And tell me about Cardinal Comey. Tell me about this name, Cardinal Comey. What does that mean?
Well, I knew James Comey. I was the elected DA in.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2 of the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. My name is Paul. Thank you so much for being with us. You can call us, text us, 870-275-9799. You can also sound off over on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. Now, I want to remind everybody out there of our YouTube channel. And the reason I want to remind everybody is you can comment on the YouTube videos and comment during. Right, Joe? You can comment. Are you shaking your head or nodding your head? I can't tell. You can comment live. The reason I want to tell you this is on the offhand chance. Well, here's the thing. Facebook is plummeted last week. It absolutely plummeted last week. And some people have alluded that, Facebook could go the way of MySpace. Do you remember MySpace, Joe? Did you ever I had a MySpace. I think I did. I don't even know. It's nobody cares anything about MySpace. But there was MySpace and Facebook and MySpace, and MySpace is no more. Facebook is what it is.
Oh, the next one's called FaceSpace.
Yeah, FaceSpace. That's the next one. Anyway, I just want to tell our Facebook audience that if you wanted to transition to YouTube, or if something ever happened and, Facebook is, I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what the Zuckerberg has planned? You know what I mean? Who knows? But we always have that as like a bailout. So we're all on YouTube, Conduit News. If you go to the YouTube channel, Conduit News, please subscribe and hit the little bell for notifications. Okay. I want to start with this story today in the Democrat Gazette. And hang on one second. Where did it go? I just had it in front of me. It had to do with, because I jokingly said something about, here it is. I jokingly said something about Jake Files, who pled guilty for stealing the taxpayer money. Well, we now have the sports complex has asked for an exit from the city's suit. This has to do with the River Valley Sports Complex. A lawsuit over the work left unpaid after the complex's partners, including former state senator Jake Files, abandoned the project, leaving the city to pick up the tab. Sebastian County Clerk Judge Stephen Tabor heard arguments from the complex's remaining partner Lee Webb and an attorney representing the city over the River Valley Sports Complex's motion for summary judgment. Files wasn't in court Monday. He's scheduled to report to federal prison Thursday to begin serving an 18-month sentence after pleading guilty to bank fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Only Webb was present Monday for the River Valley Sports Complex. Well, if you have somewhere to be, you probably need to, if it's a pre-scheduled appointment to start serving your time in prison, maybe you should keep that appointment. I think we can all agree that's reasonable. But he argued that there were no facts in dispute for a jury to decide, and that all remained was for Tabor to rule in favor to rule in River Valley Sports Complex's favor as a matter of law and dismiss Fort Smith's lawsuit. Wait, so hang on a second. You got a city here that, thought this work was going to get done. You just had to happen to have a head of a company, also a state senator who was forging bids in other companies' names. Remember that. That's the one thing that is just nuts to me. The hubris. The absolute hubris. Think about this. The hubris of thinking that you're going to funnel general improvement fund money to your employee. You have her submit a bid, and then you just make up other bids based on other companies that exist, and then they come out, and you get caught, and then you claim that it's some conspiracy against you, that these companies conspire to lie. That they're saying, wait a second, that doesn't even look like our paperwork. When we submit a bid, it looks nothing like this. We didn't submit this bid. And that's how he got the lowest bid. That's how he got the money. Anyway. River Valley Sports Complex owed $200,000 to 4 companies: B&A Electric, McGee Fence Contracting, Grimes Dozer Service, and James Griffith, for the work the companies did on the ball fields. Up in my neck of the woods, I live up in northeast Arkansas, and there's a very nice softball complex south of town, south of Jonesboro. And I drive by it. When I drive by it, I think, oh, man, amazing. Something. I think to myself, we did it. We built a softball. It's like some sort of achievement. It's like I just every time I just chuckle at this thing. I'm just like, wow, it can be done. A softball complex can be built. It can happen. Oh my goodness. All right. Next up, Medicaid funding for non-abortion services. Joe, I know you don't have these articles, but it's okay. Medicaid funding blocked for clinics. Judge denies Planned Parenthood. This is a good thing. I'm going to have more on that tomorrow. Want to say congratulations to Leslie Rutledge. She announced the birth of her daughter. So congratulations to Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, and announcing on Friday that she gave birth to a daughter. That's fantastic news there. Congratulations to the Madam Attorney General. Okay, I want to take a break because I have a few things to get to. Coming up on the program, we're going to be talking with Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch. Certainly want to pay attention to that. It's going to be a great interview. But when we come back, carefully crafted language segment. I'll tell you what carefully crafted language is. I'll tell you who coined the term, and I'll tell you what's not carefully crafted language when we return in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment.
Westchester County, United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time, and our offices were next to each other. And I liked the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say he went to Washington and he drifted. Because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew as a prosecutor, with Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants, all the while she destroys evidence, freaks bits, hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. I mean, they call him in the FBI behind his back.
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks.
The FBI, because he's got this holier than thou. I know everything, and now he's quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. You've admitted you're...
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry.
the zip line has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the zip line. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Sorry, a little busy here. So our carefully crafted language segment, let's talk about that. Where did it come from? Well, of course, it came from a very, very good question, carefully crafted language asking the governor about what he thought about. It had to do with the private option Obamacare thing. But then, he responded. He didn't want to answer the question, so he just said this. Listen.
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
Yeah, so it kind of spawned something in 2015 where we started realizing, well, hey, this is something that a lot of politicians do. The governor specifically has done this many, many times where he carefully crafts the language, which is really a way to, I guess, if you don't read between the lines, you might find yourself being hypnotized, being duped, thinking to yourself, I think I'm getting exactly what I want. And then, of course, the person that's on the opposite side of the political spectrum of you, they also think they're getting what they want. It's a weird phenomenon. It's carefully crafted language. Well, I thought I would tell you what is not carefully crafted language. If you want to see carefully crafted language, what not to do, then you need to check out this clip from The Daily Show. The host, Trevor Noah, decided to ask newly elected Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, how would you pay for your socialist utopian agenda? And her answer is, well, let's just say it's less than desirable if you really do want to see socialism be achieved. This is the newly elected sorority president. Oh, I'm sorry. Not sorority president. She's a congresswoman from New York. Listen.
But then the pragmatic side of it comes in, as you said. Mm-hmm. How do you pay for these? You always see people coming in with economic arguments, and they say, look, these numbers don't really add up. In order to get health care for everybody, this is what it would cost. That's going to be troubling. Even if you reverse the Republican tax deal, that's only going to make up 5% of what we need to pay for Medicare for all. How do you pay for education for all? How do you pay for all of these ideas?
So this is an excellent question. And in fact, there's a lot of back of the envelope stuff based on our values. So, for example, I sat down with a Nobel Prize economist last week. I can't believe I can say that. It's really weird. But one of the things that we saw is if people pay their fair share, if corporations and the ultra
we got to pause in the video.
Wealthy,
like totally.
For example, as Warren Buffett likes to say.
It's the whole capital gains secretary. We may have to refresh the page, Joe. I don't know
if
what's
he
going
paid
on.
as much as his secretary paid, 15%, if he paid a 15% tax rate, if corporations pay.
Okay, so refresh real quick. It's been sitting there too long, and this will figure it out. But here's the thing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, newly elected president of her, Congresswoman from New York. She has botched just a basic question. We've got to get to the rest of the clip, though, so we can talk about her being wrong.
These ideas.
So this is an excellent question, and in fact, there's a lot of back of the envelope stuff based on our values. So, for example, I sat down with a Nobel Prize economist last week. I can't believe I can say that. It's really weird, but one of the things that we saw is if people pay their fair share, if corporations and the ultra wealthy, for example, as Warren Buffett likes to say, if he paid as much as his secretary paid, 15%, if he paid a 15% tax rate, if corporations paid.
Yeah, well, okay, so eventually.
If we reverse the tax bill, but when.
Just stop it right now. All right, so Ocasio-Cortez capped her explanation with this embarrassing flub, according to the Washington Examiner. Then the last key, which is extremely, extremely important, is reprioritization. Just last year, we gave the military a $700 billion budget increase, which they didn't even ask for. They're like, we don't want another fighter jet. They're like, don't give us another nuclear bomb, you know? Washington Examiner writes, no, I don't know. The national defense budget was not increased by $700 billion last year. Rather, Congress approved $700 billion in total national defense spending for fiscal year 2018, as the Washington Examiner's Caitlin Harrell noted. Yes, Joe?
She is just going to kill it down at the well in D.C. She's just going to kill it. Yeah. She's going to do so good.
Mm-hmm. She is going to do excellent. Do we have any more? Is it buffered a little more, or do we know if we can get through it? So bear with me here.
Raised our corporate tax rate to 28%, which is not even as high as it was before.
Right.
If we do those two things and also close some of those loopholes, that's $2 trillion right there. That's $2 trillion in 10 years. And
not according to Bernie
Sanders. One of the wide estimates is that it's going to take $3 to $4 trillion to transition us to 100%.
Even socialist Bernie Sanders says it would only be 1.38 trillion, and that is optimistic to say the least.
But that's in 10 years.
Yeah, I know. And what do we have, like a $15-16 trillion economy? Maybe more than that now that Trump's got that GDP where it is. Keep going with her. I know. Everyone's dumber for having listened to this, but just keep going. It's a sorority president. I mean,
so we got
Congresswoman.
$2 trillion from folks paying their fair share, which they were not paying before the Trump tax bill.
Right.
They weren't They weren't paying that before the Trump tax bill. If we get people to pay their fair share, that's $2 trillion in 10 years.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I don't know why our computers mess it up, but it's probably the Twitters. Anyway, so as we, I wanted to give you stop. I wanted to just give that to you as an example of what carefully crafted language is not. Blabbering, blundering about how socialism is going to work and everything else, and how all of a sudden you're, a budget hawk, and like totally it's going to be amazing and awesome, and I just really want to thank. I really want to thank everybody. I don't know. I could get mean here. I'm not going to. But anyway, this is why I wanted to do this segment, though. Okay. Over at the Washington Times, in response to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her, rising, she's kind of a rising star, if you will. Yeah, of the Washington, we want the Washington Times piece. You have Louis Black. Louis Black says Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not the answer. Now, Louis Black is a comedian. He's a raunchy comedian known for his angry tirades. He's a socialist. So, this is a guy who believes in the same stuff that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does, that we should all be forced to put all of our money into one big pot and divide it up equally and hope that the oligarchs, after they've instituted this utopia, will somehow give up the power and not murder a portion of the population they disagree with. Lewis Black, an admitted socialist, is saying something different. And in so doing, he is exposing this concept of carefully crafted language and how useful it is to grow the size of government. Listen to this. Jessica Chasmar, stand-up comedian and self-described socialist Lewis Black, thinks radical candidates such as New York's congressional primary winner Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are not the answer for the Democratic Party going into future elections. Stop. Replace the word radical with honest. You see, that last clip you saw of Ocasio-Cortez, you can say a lot of things. She's honestly telling you what she thinks. It doesn't make any sense, but she's honestly telling you her opinion about how things should work. Massive tax increases. People pay their fair share. Millionaires and billionaires. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. Stand-up comedian and self-described socialist Lewis Black thinks honest candidates such as New York congressional socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are not the answer. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic socialist, stunned the Democrat Party earlier this month when she won New York's 14th congressional district and became the president of her sorority. Representative Joseph Crowley is who she beat, boosted by former presidential candidate Democratic socialist Bernie Sanders. It's going to be a socialist utopia, I tell you. Mr. Black said he's worried about this new trend. He was asked by the Daily Beast whether candidates such as Ocasio-Cortez gave him a glimmer of hope. He answered, quote, "No, it doesn't, because it's not going to happen. The one thing I've learned in my lifetime is that we've got to get to the middle before we can start pushing things in the other direction," the 69-year-old said. We've got to get to the middle, and they have to sit down and decide how to do things. Now, what is Lewis Black, the admitted socialist, saying here? He's saying you're never going to get Americans to go hard left, hard socialist from where we are. It has to be gradual. You have to go to the middle. And what would you go to the middle and do? You would go to the middle with carefully crafted language, and then you would slowly, as Barack Obama said when he was in Little Rock appearing with Mike Beebe, you've got to bend the arc of justice. And this is the leftist socialist microwave communism tactic, okay? This is what they are trying to do, and it's an interesting admission from a socialist comedian like Lewis Black. Very interesting, saying, no, Ocasio-Cortez isn't the answer because people are going to reject her. I can't imagine why. Why would they reject a woman as articulate as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Can you imagine? What? You guys missed it. If you didn't see the part where she says, I sat down with a Nobel Prize economist. What? Yeah, you know, come on, act like you've been there before. A lot of people are going to find that refreshing, though, that she's acting like she hasn't been there before, because, in fact, she hasn't. But her ideas are so good, though, right? I mean, can you imagine? Let's raise the corporate tax, and that's going to give us right there $2 trillion in 10 years. And then, of course, you got to close loopholes. You got to close the loopholes. Everybody knows you got to close those loopholes. You know, Warren Buffett, and, you know, the military's like $700 billion increase. I mean, the military's like, we don't want another plane. We don't want another nuclear bomb. We've got to take a break. We're going to be right back with Robert Spencer. Robert Spencer's the director of Jihad Watch, the author of the new book, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. We'll talk to him about what happened in Canada, and I'm sure some other things as well. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. This is Conduit News Radio. Back in just a moment.
Westchester County, he was United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time. And our offices were next to each other. And, I liked the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say he went to Washington and he drifted. Because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew as a prosecutor, with Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants, all the while she destroys evidence, freaks bits, hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. I mean, they call him in the FBI behind his back Cardinal Comey. I think the FBI is best friends with the FBI because he's got this holier than thou. I know everything. And now he's quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. You've admitted you're a leaker. I mean, I could go on, but you got to get my book. Liars, leakers, and liberals.
Yeah, and it's available now, folks. So we've thrown the Amazon page up on the screen for those of you who are watching as instead of listening. Now, 3 days. I'd love to get your opinion, Judge Janine, on the recent news here. 3 days before President Trump and President Putin were scheduled to meet in Helsinki, you had the announcement of the 12 Russians being indicted. Now, to me, it seemed that there were some trying to stop this diplomacy or attempt at diplomacy from ever happening. And if it was going to happen, they were going to make it really, really difficult and give the media all of the fodder they needed to try to paint this concept of collusion. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that Mueller announced those indictments 3 days before the Helsinki meeting?
I like you. No, it's no coincidence. Of course they decided to say we're indicting 12 Russians. Well, if you recall, they indicted 13 a few months back, having nothing to do with Donald Trump or collusion. They indicted a total of 25 Russians or charged them who will never be extradited, never be arrested, arraigned, tried, convicted, or sentenced. I mean, what is the point? It just keeps it in the news, and they're trying to get Donald Trump off his game. But as I say in the book, the man's a force of nature. He can walk into a den of lions and come out the winner. He has no fear. He takes incoming every day for the American people. And when you think about it, that guy could be in Scotland right now. He could have stayed in Scotland and kept playing golf. But he doesn't.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Good morning to you. We're in the home stretch here in the broadcast, and we really appreciate you listening. The website is jihadwatch.org. And the man is Robert Spencer. He's the director of Jihad Watch. He has led seminars on Islam and jihad for the FBI, the United States Central Command, the United States Army Command, and General Staff College, the U.S. Army's Asymmetric Warfare Group, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Justice Department's Anti-Terrorism Advocacy Council, and the U.S. Intelligence Community. Robert Spencer joins us now. Robert, welcome to the program, sir.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now, you're also the author of the new book, The History of Jihad, From Muhammad to ISIS. What can you tell us about that?
This is the first and only one-volume treatment in the English language of the entire history of jihad activity, violence by Muslims in order to impose Islamic law around the world, starting in the 7th century and going right up to today. Of course, this is the motivation behind the terror threat that we face around the world today, and it's what was behind 9/11, what was behind the Boston Marathon bombing, and many, many other things. And I show in the book that this is something that is a war that is 1,400 years old, is still being fought, has constantly been fought around the world. This is the first time the whole story of it has been told.
We got it up on the screen there for our online audience, The History of Jihad. You can get it on Amazon right there, folks. You can see it if this is something you're interested in. Robert, it's fascinating to me, as you know. I guess I was in high school on September the 11th, 2001, and I remember that day, very vividly. But this was kind of, I never knew anything about what was going on in the Middle East. Never knew anything about it. And, it came to my country. It hit us home, and then, to see the transition from what happened in the Bush administration to the Obama administration. First of all, I just have to say it kind of shows the tolerance of this country. If you'd have told people on September 12th, 2001 that, 7 years later we're going to elect a man named Barack Hussein Obama, people would have said, no, there's no way. And yet, here we are. We did. But then they started stripping things out of the FBI in their manuals in any reference to what you call jihad. Isn't that correct?
That's right. And I show this in the book that after 9/11, Bush started it, really, when he went into a mosque 6 days after the attack and said that Islam was a religion of peace, while standing there with a man who is now in prison for financing Al-Qaeda and another who is the head of a Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood front. And Obama made it even worse by, as you say, he did in 2011, he forbade any mention of Islam and jihad in connection with terrorism. People find this really hard to believe, but it's 100% true. If you were to join the FBI today and go in, say you wanted to study counterterrorism, they would tell you all about so-called right-wing extremism, but they wouldn't tell you a thing about Islamic jihadis. As far as the FBI and the other intelligence agencies are concerned, there is no jihad threat, and this has not yet changed, although President Trump, of course, has been very clear that he wants it changed. It has not yet been changed in the Trump administration.
I find that very frightening that we have, the civilian leader of the executive branch and these agencies that are supposed to be in the executive branch are not very responsive to the President of the United States. That's very concerning to me. Is it concerning to you?
Yes, it is. And this is really the first time this has happened in American history. I think that we all assumed that on January 20th, 2017, the new president would start implementing his program, and the people in the various government agencies would implement that program willingly. And this is the first time that we have seen what is really a large-scale revolt on the part of these agencies in refusing to implement the president's program and clinging to the programs of his predecessor. And this is something that's got to stop, because it's a grave threat to our entire republic, our electoral system. I mean, why even bother throwing somebody out and bringing somebody else in if the people who actually implement the policies aren't going to change anything?
That's exactly right. And we were actually talking about this last hour just on the border wall funding and how the American people voted for President Trump. One of the key things he said he was going to do was build the wall, and now we have members of the Republican Party saying they're not going to include it in the funding. So it's kind of along the same lines. It's like, okay, well, so do we not have the power of the vote, and the consent of the governed is being violated here left and right? And certainly on this concept of radical Islamic terror. Last week or back on the 24th, you had this, or I guess before that, but the Toronto shooting rampage. We have new details. Of course, just like everything else, Robert Spencer, they always are like, this has nothing to do with Islam, nothing to see here. And then, of course, a couple days later, we find out this guy's been to, ISIS websites and things like that. What were your thoughts on the recent shooting in Toronto?
I thought it was more of the pervasive denial that is absolutely blanketing the West in our response to the jihad threat at this point. That, for example, in the last chapter of the book, the one that's about jihad in this century, is called "The West Loses the Will to Live." And part of that loss of the will to live is the unwillingness or inability to name the enemy and to confront the enemy for what he really is and stands for. And this shooting in Toronto is just another example. The guy's visiting ISIS websites. That's not a rumor. That was reported by the Canadian police. And then the very same Canadian police, even after ISIS also claimed the shooting, said this has nothing to do with jihad or Islam, and it was all about he was mentally ill. And yet, also, police sources in Toronto said that they had never seen such a well-trained marksman, such an experienced and adept shooter. And you got to wonder, how did some mentally ill person who was fighting mental illness all his life become an expert marksman to the degree that he even impresses police officers who are also trained shooters?
That's a very good point. It's all but it's all suppressed. I mean, especially in Canada. Yeah. I mean, I found out about it from, believe it or not, CBS. I couldn't believe but CBS, I think, is willing to report stuff that does not here, domestic here in the United States. It's all suppressed. They can't bring themselves to admit it.
Yes, and things are getting very bad about this. It's as if the leftists claim that Muslims are victims and that they are never anything else but victims, and any discussion that is revolving jihad terrorism is to be forbidden because it further victimizes Muslims. This idea has taken root to such an extent. Here again in Canada, just a few days ago, there was a man who was protesting near the site of the shooting in Toronto and criticizing Islam. And he was standing in front of a fountain, and somebody grabbed him and threw him into the fountain, which could have caused him serious injuries. And the police were standing right there and did nothing, made no arrests, no charges, nothing.
Gosh. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen over in what we're seeing in Europe with the immigration situation there, and also London? I mean, we essentially have, and I don't think, and I know you agree with this, but this is essentially a Western civilization struggle. And in many cases, people on the left are somewhat suicidal. You just mentioned it, losing the will to live. Is there, with the Brexit that's trying to go on and things like that, and London or the UK trying to be more independent, do you think that they'll ever get a handle on this immigration crisis that's changing their society over there?
I don't think so. It seems as if the political elites are deeply committed to this idea of mass immigration. Just this morning, the Spanish foreign minister was saying, hey, we need new blood, and saying that these people ought to be coming in massive numbers because the native European population is decreasing. And so they're going to get new blood, and a lot of it's going to be spilled on the street. The problem of the mass Muslim migration is that among the peaceful migrants, you're going to get a certain number of jihadis. And those jihadis are going to be waging the same jihad that's been waged around the world for 1,400 years to try to bring about the conquest of Europe and its submission to Islam. The prophecy is attributed to Muhammad, the prophet of Islam himself, that Muslims will eventually conquer Rome, and they've got a better chance to do it now than they ever have.
Yeah, everybody is they fail to recognize a threat, and that's certainly is unfortunate. What about the southern border? We're talking with Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch. It's jihadwatch.org, and he also does have a new book out. I want you guys to check it out, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. What about the southern border? Is there any threat? I mean, obviously we have unchecked people coming across the border there, but you've always heard these rumors, if you will, and I know they're not rumors, but the left certainly calls them rumors. You found a prayer rug on the border. What can you say about that?
It's much more than that, much more. I'll tell you something. You know that ISIS is not just in Iraq and Syria. Actually, they've been mostly driven out of Iraq and Syria, and they have dispersed around the world. And one of the hotbeds of ISIS activity today is Bangladesh. And in Laredo, Texas, the police have reported about 200 Bangladeshi nationals over the last year have tried to get over across the border illegally. Now, you got to wonder, why is a guy from Bangladesh going to travel to Mexico to sneak into the United States? Probably is some of those guys, at very least, are ISIS.
Yeah, that is absolutely terrifying, frightening. It's what's worse is that we had Maria Espinoza from the Remembrance Project. She was on here yesterday, and she was talking. It's an organization that is there to remember people who have been killed by illegal immigrants through illegal immigration. And we have people in our country, as far as the southern border and that issue, they're making the economic arguments. You have elites that, they want unchecked illegal immigration. It's going to keep the wages low and everything else. But no one is really talking about the actual danger here, the violent crimes, if not the jihadists, the potential there. And it's like we want the government to reinvent or invent new responsibilities, but they're abdicating their chief responsibility, which is, if you're going down to the southern border, Robert, we've posted signs saying, maybe you don't take the southern route along the U.S. side. Maybe you take the northern route because we can't guarantee your safety. I mean, that is embarrassing that we, in our own country, we can't say, you're going to be safe within the borders of this country.
That's right. And it's an abdication of responsibility, as you say, on a massive scale that, combined with the abdication of responsibility to know the enemy, which is the first step toward defeating him, that has been committed by the Obama administration and is still going on in terms of the jihad threat, it spells disaster in the future. And this has got to be changed. To his credit, the president keeps insisting. And
I really hope. So are you optimistic? Do you think that President Donald Trump, it seems like we've come a long way. I can't remember if it was John Brennan or James Clapper in congressional testimony. He was asked, I believe, about the Muslim Brotherhood or one of these radical organizations, and he was apologizing for them. He was saying that they're not terrorists. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was Clapper. Yeah.
Okay, Clapper.
He said that the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the Brotherhood of Muslims. I mean, I know it sounds absurd. I'm saying the obvious, but it's not obvious because Clapper said the Muslim Brotherhood is a largely secular organization. In reality, the Muslim Brotherhood is just what it says it is, a Muslim Brotherhood that is dedicated to implementing the Quran and the political aspects of Islam and imposing them upon societies around the world.
So are you optimistic that President Donald Trump, he's at least using the bully pulpit trying to get changes here? Do you think we're going to see any of these changes in being able to correctly identify the threats to this country?
Well, they've already revealed a national security strategy that actually mentions Sharia, Islamic law, and identifies it as something that is incompatible with constitutional principles. That's extraordinary, and I applaud the president for that because Sharia does deny the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, the equality of rights of women, the equality of rights of non-Muslims with Muslims. And so that needs to be recognized, and it has never been before. As a matter of fact, the Obama administration actively supported Sharia state, and it was a very welcome thing to see, but it's essentially just a statement so far. It needs to be implemented.
Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch. It's jihadwatch.org and the new book, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. Robert, I appreciate you coming on the program. It's great to meet you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Call me anytime.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Folks, this is Conduit News Radio. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back here in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. From the beginning, authors of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers advocated the general election of people who possess wisdom, discernment, and loyalty to their constituents. Why? The people expect their representatives to uphold their promises. The representatives recognize the honor bestowed by these constituents. Advancement comes from their followers, not the government. Elections are frequent, and accountability is a compelling factor to loyalty and support from constituents. From a July 5th, 1929 speech by President Calvin Coolidge. This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Westchester County, United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time. And our offices were next to each other. And, I like the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say he went to Washington and he drifted. Because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew as a prosecutor, with Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants. All the while, she destroys evidence, freaks it, hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. I mean, they call him in the FBI behind his back Cardinal Comey. I speak to FBI. I'm friends with the FBI because he's got this holier than thou. I know everything, and now he's quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He was under investigation until he fired you.
This is ASA News, The Parrot. With breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. I'm Bob Baloney. There are reports circling around from politicians who are in the know, and the same phrase keeps being used. That phrase is new revenue generation. Let's go to our reporter on the ground from the Capitol, Haley Hogwash. Haley?
Thanks, Bob. Yes, it seems the more politicians I talk to, the more I hear the phrase new revenue generation. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means, but you can rest assured it will be good for the people of Arkansas.
Haley, it certainly sounds like something good. I like how the phrase uses the word generation. That makes me think this has got to be doing something positive for our children in the future. Haley?
Yes, Bob, some new developments. I've just been speaking to some people who are here and are not politicians, and they tell me the phrase new revenue generation is actually code for a new tax.
Oh, my. Well, if this is true, Haley, that would add to a growing list of new taxes that have barely made any headlines at all, so it's best not to discuss them here on ASA News, The Parrot.
Yes, Bob, I know it's sure to make government officials angry that their phrasing of the new revenue generation has been changed by the people and called a tax increase.
I would expect an announcement from Mother Government soon to set the record straight. What is the new tax? Revenue generation, Haley?
Well, this new tax, a new revenue generation would add to a growing list. First, there was a revenue generation on movies, books, and songs that people download using the internet. And next, there was the tax increase. The new revenue generation on all purchases made using the internet. And now I'm told this new revenue generation is a tax on the people's patience.
I realize the people don't like it, Haley, but specifically, what is the new tax? Revenue generation.
No, Bob, I'm telling you, according to the activists here at the Capitol who have gathered and are listening to some radio broadcast, the revenue generation is literally taxing the patience of the people of Arkansas. I'm told the less patience you have with the government
better not tax our patience.
The more they will tax your patience and the more money you will owe at a later date. I'm also told the collection method on taxing your patience will be decided in a newly formed multicolored ribbon task force.
How taxing.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, in Benton County, I didn't get to this story, but in Benton County, they're trying to shift to video sessions in order to let family members see inmates. Arkansas jails pay-to-visit plan panned. I agree. I know the ACLU is involved here, but this just seems kind of strange to me, where you're going to pay visitors to put money in a kiosk to be able to see their loved ones in prison. Now, look, I know they're in prison, and prison's not supposed to be some sort of, great place to go. People don't want to be there. But this is something that's a little bit controversial. It talks about Mary Vaught. This is a story by Tracy Neal that Mary Vaught prefers to go and visit her son in the Benton County Jail and doesn't want to chat with him on a video screen. I really like going to see him in person, even through the glass. I guess I'm old-fashioned. I want to see him face-to-face. The Benton County Sheriff's Office recently announced it would end in-person visits at the jail September 1st in favor of video visits with a fee attached to them. The change, however, may be delayed, Sergeant Shannon Jenkins, the public information deputy for the Sheriff's Office, later said. That's because this idea of adding a kiosk in the lobby so people can come to the jail and visit, well, you're there, though. You come to the jail to talk to somebody through a kiosk when you're now in the same vicinity, you're in the same building as that person. It's just weird. It's also a way for revenue generation. Yes, that's right. You heard the parody, revenue generation. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Folks, as we wind the show down today, I want to put a little end cap on where we started. The headline at the 6 o'clock hour, the story that we went with was the national news that had to do with the Congress, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan. It appears they don't want to give funding to Homeland Security to fund the border wall, and yet that's the one thing Donald Trump was crystal clear about. We listened to some Tucker Carlson from Fox News yesterday, specifically Lou Dobbs, and what he was saying, how egregious this is, that we have the Republicans in leadership not wanting to listen to the American people. And specifically, the Koch brothers were called out. The Koch brothers, who have been synonymous with the Republican Party for a very long time. Donald Trump, President Trump, has now responded to the Koch brothers. Quote, the globalist Koch brothers, who have become a total joke in real Republican circles, are against strong borders and powerful trade. I never sought their support because I don't need their money or bad ideas. They love my tax and regulation cuts, judicial picks, and more. I made them richer. Their network is highly overrated. I have beaten them at every turn. They want to protect their companies outside the United States from being taxed. I'm for America first and the American worker. A puppet for no one. Two nice guys with bad ideas. Make America great again. End quote. President Donald Trump. Sounds like a mic drop moment to me, in my opinion. I don't know about you. Two nice guys, bad ideas, make America great again. Very interesting stuff there, developments going on between the Koch brothers and their agenda. And you know what? Donald Trump's calling it like I see it. If you want to know, according to Donald Trump, you want to know why the Koch brothers are against these tariffs? Even though I've talked to an American businessman. We had Joe Maynard on the program who thinks that the steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs are a good thing because we need to be able to manufacture our airplanes and stuff right here in the country for national security reasons. You want to know why the Koch brothers are, up in arms about this? Donald Trump calling them out, said, you've got companies outside the U.S. and you don't like it. And what does he call them? He says the globalist Koch brothers, who have become a total joke in the Republican circle, are against strong borders, powerful trade. I never sought their support because I don't need their money or bad ideas. They love my tax, regulation cuts, judicial picks, and more. I made them richer. Their network is highly overrated. I've beaten them at every turn. They want to protect their companies outside the U.S. from being taxed. I'm for America first and the American worker, a puppet for no one, two nice guys with bad ideas, make America great again. Again, that's President Donald Trump. We'll have, I'm sure, more on this. There's going to be more developments, there is, between now and the 23 hours, right? That we'll meet again 23 hours. We'll see you tomorrow. Arkansas, you guys have a great day. Be safe.